We're focusing on the ground. On the ground, what do we do? Boots on the ground, election integrity, getting people to actually vote, stuff like that. No one better to talk to than Vivek Ramaswamy, former presidential candidate. His book, Woke Inc., still super relevant. You should still definitely read it, even though it's been a couple of years now. Vivek, how you doing, brother?
It's good to see you. How are you?
One thing I want to chat with you about, I'm doing great, thank you. One thing I want to chat to you about is the power of Google and the power of social media and the power of big tech to really, really work their power in the last few days and weeks and maybe even months of this election. What are you seeing? What are you concerned about?
Look, I'm concerned that for most, we actually have tech companies that are responding to certain actors in the administrative state, what we call the deep state, to do through the back door what the government could not do through the front door under the Constitution. That's actually what the Supreme Court oral arguments were all about. And that's my top concern is you have tech companies that have lobbied Washington, D.C., that are in this internecine relationship. And those deep state actors are then getting those tech companies like Facebook, like Google, including YouTube, like Twitter before Elon took it over, to be able to censor speech that the government couldn't censor directly. Now, heading into an election year, this becomes particularly problematic. Look at what happened in 2020, the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, Google algorithms boosting up certain content versus others. This is far more influential than any campaign contribution ever has been. And yet it's deciding and tipping the scales of an election in an election year yet again. So those are some of my top concerns.
Yeah, give me like a dystopian future of what that could look like. And the problem is most people would never see it when it's happening. You don't see it. The Hunter Biden laptop is obvious, right? Right. But there'll be things that we will never know.
Exactly. And you're raising an important point where we've almost focused too much on the most egregious examples of outright censorship of individual accounts. These tech companies have gotten smarter. They realize that that actually results in so much public backlash, it puts them on the back foot. That the real way they're able to tip the scales is through what they would sometimes call shadow banning, which is suppressing the reach of certain content or amplifying the reach of certain content. And then the other thing that they're doing is also changing the results of even the search algorithm. So that's behind the scenes. That's in the algorithms itself. There's going to be never a news headline that says this person was banned or censored. That almost makes it too easy. What they're looking to do is actually make it much harder to detect, but have a much broader impact in the process. And so that's something that needs to be exposed. I think Elon has done the best job of that, exposing the Twitter algorithms after he took it over, exposing a lot of that rot. But if what we saw at Twitter was any indication of the problem, it's really just the tip of the iceberg compared to other platforms like Facebook and Instagram, owned by Meta, like YouTube and Google Search, owned by Alphabet. That's really where I think more of the focus needs to be. And interestingly enough, conservatives, and I would just say American patriots across this country, have in some ways had the wool pulled over their eyes, focusing on just the outright banning versus the actual real threat, which is in these more subtle forms of interference.
That's right. So the theme of today's show is we have it's like a three-step process. You got to win hearts and minds, and I think we've done that in a pretty remarkable way. Then you got to get people to actually go vote, and then you got to be monitoring who's counting the voting. So on the second point, you've traveled the country, you've talked to tons of different people. What have you come across as maybe one of the main hesitations that maybe more moderate people or people who don't really pay attention to politics or whatever, what's one of the hesitations that they've had in voting for Trump?
Look, I think that it's a permission structure where many of them are prepared to vote for Trump, but we live in a culture where right now it's still not quite they're sure whether it's a fashionable thing to say in public. So I think the culture of fear is something we're going to have to defeat this year, where most people behind closed doors, I can't tell you the number of people, even when I went to visit in New York City to see extended family, my in-laws, a number of weeks ago. What do I see from doormen, taxi cab drivers, Uber drivers, telling me, hey, they recognize me and they'll say, hey, I can't say this, don't tell other people I said this, but I'm voting for Trump and I loved you in that race. The number of people who told me that individually, if they all just said it out loud, they would recognize that they weren't actually out of step with the norm. And so the top obstacle is that culture of fear. We need to overcome that culture of fear. To say that, you know what, in the United States of America, we're the country where you get to speak your mind freely without having fear of putting food on the dinner table. You get to enjoy the American dream and the First Amendment. You get to enjoy both of those things at the same time. Look back at the 2020 election, the number of people who were fired from their job for wearing the hat of the wrong political candidate, Donald Trump, to work. That's that culture of fear we've created. But now is our moment to overcome it. And I think it's up to every American to look themselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I have to behave like the future of our country depends on it, like my kids' future depends on it, because it does. That's how we overcome that culture.
I got one last question for you about young people. You and I are the same age. We're getting old now, Vivek. I don't know if you've noticed it. You know, there's generations below us now. You know, like we're millennials. We used to be like the young, and now there's like two other like letters below us now.
Sure.
So I saw a poll that was pretty wild. It said that among all the demographics, the group that has the greatest support of Donald Trump is 18 to 24-year-olds. How can that possibly be? And I think it was policy, sure, but there's like a cool factor or something too. Like, I don't know, like what's at play there?
I also see it as the greatest growth opportunity sitting in front of us if we step up and actually take advantage of it. There's something about being 18, 19 years old that makes you want to stick it to the man, to step up to the system. That's where a lot of the woke movement came from. Stick it to the man, saying that we're going to be woke. You're going to talk about systemic racism or gender identity or whatever, climate change. And for a while, 10, 20 years ago, that was bucking what they saw as the orthodoxy. Well, what began as a challenge to the system today has literally become the new system. So if you're 18, 19 years old today and you really want to stick it to the man, you really want to be a hippie, you really want to be countercultural, say you're voting for Donald Trump. Say you're a conservative. Say you want to be married, have children, raise your kids in a tradition of faith, believe in patriotism of this country, to say the country was founded, yes, in 1776 and not 1619. That's how you stick it to the man right now. That's the opportunity I've seen traveling across this country to college campuses and otherwise. I, as part of the campaign last year when I was running for president, visited more college campuses than probably any Republican candidate has. We can't be afraid to show up. And so many of those young people are hungering for a different direction. I've done everything I can to bring them along, and I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of this year. I know you and I are old compared to them, but still young compared to Republican politicians. And so it's up to people like us to be able to reach that next generation and bring them along. That's what I'm going to do this year, because I see a major growth opportunity there amongst young people, new voters, 18 to 25, 18 to 30, who are going to be prepared to vote for Donald Trump if someone shows up and gives them a good reason to say, hey, this is the way of the future. Let your conformist peers go the way of just abiding by pro-Biden slogans or pro-Democrat slogans. That's the way of the past. And I think if we make that small investment in our message and even in showing up, it's going to have a huge return on that investment, and part of what delivers us that landslide victory that I see potential for this fall.
Yeah, and we're grateful you're all still in that fight. Vivek Ramaswamy, appreciate you, brother. Where should people go to read more about you, follow you, etc.?
Hey, you can follow me on all social media. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram. You can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm not difficult to find, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Beautiful. Vivek, appreciate you, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.